news coming in. Ahead of talks with Russian President Putin, US President Donald Trump has announced that tariffs on steel and chips will be set next week, with rates expected to start lower than initial levels. Trump also highlighted his focus on the US economy and said Russian President Vladimir Putin is interested in discussions about trade and business. These comments come ahead of the high-profile Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, where economic issues are expected to be part of the agenda. Adit, let's move back to that we've said previously, that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick are on that plane to Alaska with the US President. What is on the economic agenda that both the United States and Russia are to discuss?
I think, like I mentioned in my last, discussion with yourself, Luhansk is going to be on the top agenda item, which is, how do the Russians and the United States basically go about, joint economic effort to try and mine that particular region for uranium. Along with everybody else, the chief of the CIA is also going to be there. So there's going to be a lot of talks about, intelligence sharing. There's also going to be talks about, how they can come to some sort of a compromise to ensure that, they are all on the same page and the same table, and they have something to take away for their domestic audience.
Yes, indeed. And would you mind giving us a bit of the rhetoric and the worries that Ukraine faces in possibly Donald Trump here legitimizing Putin on the world stage? We did see some imagery earlier, some peculiar imagery of the Russian foreign minister coming in into a press conference in Alaska with a CCP, a USSR jumper on. Your thoughts about that?
I think, that was a message. Remember, it's written in English, so of course, that was basically, from an optics perspective, sending out a message that the old Soviet Union still lives on in the form of the current Russian polity. And it was a sense of symbolism as well, to say that this was a Cold War, and now we are basically going back into some sort of a negotiating table. Because historically, you also have to remember that Alaska used to be one of the spots where the Americans used to hold a lot of surveillance staff and a lot of surveillance bases against the Soviet forces. So it's all about the messaging and the optics, which has clearly been sent out, and rather in a very graphic way.
Yes, Adit. We have some breaking news once again coming in, more information for the viewers. Ahead of the talks between the Russian president and the US president, Ukrainian President Zelensky has said that it's time to end the war. He is also releasing other statements. Of course, the Ukrainian president notably absent from these talks in Alaska. The significance of that, Adit, the relationship between the the Ukrainian president and the US president. We've certainly seen a tumultuous journey between the two of them. Let's take it back to that meeting in the White House, like something that we've never seen before, where Zelensky was humiliated in front of the world's press, and then moving forward to a meeting, a very serious-looking meeting in St. Peter's Basilica after Pope Francis's funeral. Could I get your thoughts on the current relationship of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Donald Trump? As, of course, we've just had that statement from the United States, from the US President, that said Ukraine will decide their territory, but once again, Donald Trump has been known to change his mind. Your thoughts on the fact that Zelensky has not been invited to these talks?
I think there's two ways to look at it. Donald Trump definitely has no respect for Zelensky, and he basically believes that Zelensky is their pawn, and he should be used as per the whims and fancies. That's the one angle. The other angle is, of course, from Zelensky's perspective. He's given out multiple statements to the tune of that. Ukrainians are not going to cede any territory, and they will not give their land to the occupier. So we know for a fact that this is going to be a hard bargain between Zelensky and Trump. But ultimately, it would come down to how United States and the allies, most importantly the European allies, especially Portugal and United Kingdom, act in this case. Because at this point, most of the arms and ammunition which Kiev is basically using against the Russian forces is coming from Europe, specifically from Portugal and United Kingdom. So as long as the United States is able to get them to play ball along with them, and create some sort of pressure on Zelensky to cede the five regions, or part of the five regions to Russia, we may see a deal in the making.
Yes, indeed. Adit, we've got another another statement from President Zelensky saying that he is counting on the United States to make a deal with Russia, and hopes that the US president wants peace. We've seen President Zelensky continuing his rhetoric, thanking continuously the US president, put a lot of pressure on the US president for these talks. Can Volodymyr Zelensky trust in Donald Trump to do that?
Well, the way Zelensky is basically playing this out is he's basically besieging Donald Trump that, do not forget about us, the Ukrainian interests. They should be of paramount importance when you are basically dealing with President Putin. And, he's basically repeating this again and again so that, Trump basically keeps that in mind, that without Zelensky and without the Ukrainian approval, no peace treaty can be signed. So I think that's basically a sort of a reminder to President Trump as a consequence. But we've also got to bear in mind that the victory that Putin basically sees, he constantly insists that the land that has been seized by Russia, which is Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kherson and Crimea, he is not willing to cede any ground on those particular regions which have been secured by the Russian forces. In addition, they also want more assurities from the Ukrainians that the Russians living in Ukraine will be treated in a humane way and will not be treated in an unfair manner as they have been done so in the past. So, there's a lot of negotiations to be done, and that negotiation cannot be completed without Zelensky. I think President Trump has also made that clear. His administration has acknowledged the fact that, once the meeting with Putin is successful, the next round of steps will be to ensure that Zelensky is invited in to the negotiating table, and they can then iron out the rest of the deals and the rest of the peace talks.
Adit Kathari, pleasure for having you on the program. We just have one little bit of information for our viewers. President Zelensky has said that these vital Putin-Trump talks opens up a path towards peace, substantive three-way discussion between leaders of the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. We will, of course, continue to bring you all the updates that we do get on this much anticipated meeting with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. That is all that we have.